Ben, Lindsey, hi.
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 Good to have you here. I'm looking forward to exploring more escape of water in blocks of flats. But before we dive into that, please introduce yourself. Lindsey, shall we start with you?
Thank you. Lindsey Joseph, and I come from an insurance background where I've worked most of my working life. I set up my own brokerage, and which was later acquired, and then I moved into the loss assessing business, and now I run an Asprey franchise focusing on managing claims, property damage claims, and more recently setting up BRM Solutions, which is about risk mitigation solutions.
Ben?
Hi. Yes. So I'm Ben. I have a completely different background to Lindsay. I started out in recruitment. So I was in healthcare recruitment for several years. That's pretty much all I'd done before coming into this industry. I was working in a company as a recruitment manager. At the time, Lindsay had set up the Asprey franchise. I didn't join straight away because I wanted some more experience in the kind of corporate world and kind of learn a bit more from that industry. But about a year into Lindsay doing the loss assessing, the business was growing to a point where she couldn't really manage it on her own. So at that point, I left what I was doing and then jumped right into loss assessing. I've been doing that now about 5 years. We both are the co-franchisee for Asprey Manchester Central, and as Lindsay mentioned, we've also set up BRM Solutions, which is a separate company, but again within the same kind of insurance and block management related sector.
Great. Thank you for your introduction, both of you. What exactly is escape of water?
I'll let you answer that, Ben.
Yeah, so an escape of water is basically an event where water or a liquid comes from a fitting or a fixture that it shouldn't. So take, for example, a hot water feed or a cold water feed for a bath or a sink. If water is coming out of that from, say, a joint or a valve that it shouldn't naturally be coming from, that would be classed as an escape of water. It can include waste pipes where there may be breaks or cracks in joints, but that's the definition of an escape of water. It's different to something like a flood or other forms of peril.
And when you say flood, like naturally block being flooded or like flooded from backing up pipes, or what is that the
Yeah, so
difference?
there can be a few different a few different kind of terms for that. Floods are typically like you mentioned, where there may be natural. So you've got situations where banks, especially heavy rainfall, banks may overflow, and that can flood areas. You have got situations where drains can back up as well. It often depends on the specific cause. Sometimes you can have situations where there may be an escape of water that's almost caused a flood. And so some people will say, we've had a flood, when in reality it may be an escape of water. Sometimes people could say they've had an escape of water, but it could be a flood. So there is a difference between the two, and it comes down to effectively what the cause of that escape. Well, the cause is more so than kind of the event or the recurring
And
damage.
who do you typically work with, and who contacts you first in terms of any situations like this? Is it leaseholders, brokers, insurers? Who do you work predominantly with? Property
So I guess
managers?
that depends on which side, whether we're looking at
Okay.
the Asprey, which is the loss assessing, or the BRM side. With the loss assessing side, that's more specifically the block managers and potentially the letting agents. With BRM, that's different, where quite often it's the brokers that get in contact with us more so than anybody, because they will come to us and say, look, we've got a client who is struggling with escapes of water in their block, their excess has just been put up to £50,000. So they're effectively uninsured for water-related incidents. They'll come to us to look at helping them for that. We do occasionally get block managers that will say they've got a problem block that they would like support with. They're the two main kind of groups that will contact us from that perspective.
I see. And Asprey is a company where anyone can contact you. That's what I understand. Okay.
Yeah. So anybody can contact us with Asprey. We help basically anybody who's got a property or a building. So we provide building insurance, claims management. So that could be an individual person, it could be a retail unit, it could be a block of flats, it could be a car garage, it could be
Yeah.
absolutely anybody.
So it could also, for example, we deal with our brokers, with our insurers, and they send loss adjuster on site. But maybe my client is asking me to contact someone like Asprey to get a second opinion. So that is
Yeah.
something that, okay.
Yeah. So the way the sector works is the insurer will have an adjuster who is representing the insurer's
Yeah,
interests. A loss assessor is the flip side. We actually represent the leaseholder, the actual policy holder, and we make sure their interests are maintained
I see.
to level it up.
I see. I see. So in terms of damages and action that you that you deal majority of the time with, any stories that strike you on the first instance I ask you to tell me a story, because I'm sure there are many stories that you can tell, but anything that comes in your mind.
Yeah, there's definitely one which we dealt with a couple of years ago.
Hmm.
So it was quite a major incident where there was a large escape of water in an apartment block on the seventh floor,
Okay.
and it had spread laterally to a number of apartments and also the communal area, but it had also naturally travelled down and affected some flats below and the communal area there. So I think it affected about 8 or 9 apartments in total,
Wow.
along with some quite large communal areas, and it was quite a quite a large claim. That
I can imagine. And what was so who called you?
so the block manager
Okay.
got in touch with us for that. We dealt with them quite frequently, and they called us to let us know that they've got an issue. They didn't know the extent of it at the time.
Mhm.
I'd basically gone in to have a look, and from having a look straight away, I could see that there was a lot more than meets the eye with the damage and where it spread. I'd done an inspection and suspected that there was nearly a dozen apartments affected.
Mm.
At this point, the insurers weren't sure, and they kind of had ruled it down to about 2 apartments. And so there was a bit of back and forth in trying to actually uncover the full extent of damage, which did take some time.
What was the issue?
So the issue was a in the main bathroom of one of the flats, the pan connector for the toilet was actually broken, and so it was over time releasing water, black water, which is hazardous water, into the box area behind the toilet, and it was then just tracking across that whole apartment and also down into the flats below. But it had been going on for a significant amount of time. The damage there was extensive, but there was tiled floors,
Yeah.
tenants in place who hadn't notified their letting agents, unfortunately, that they had mold all over their flat, which was quite extensive. And so it was fairly obvious when going in there, but the where it actually ended up and the extent and its reach
Mm.
was quite surprising, um, given the amount of damage that was already visible in
Yeah.
the actual source flat.
So basically, it wasn't communal area in the block
Yeah.
issue, but it was down to one apartment that it was rented out, and
Yes.
tenants did not report that issue.
Yeah,
And
unfortunately
then,
not.
as you said, many flats have suffered in due course.
Yeah.
And how did you? So, because you said it wasn't that visible where the issue was coming from, but how did you find out what actually the issue was and where was it coming from? Did you use any tools or what? What?
Yeah, so initially on my inspection, I used a variety of tools. So I had moisture meters, which were able
Mhm.
to detect any elevated readings of moisture or water within materials, and also thermal imaging, which helped really locate an area that was of concern, which was the bathroom. Um, at that point, because the insurers were involved and there was quite a large, there was potential for it to affect a large number of properties. A leak detection inspection was carried out across all of these flats and the communal areas to be able to kind of trace where the actual source was and also the extent of damage, and that took quite some time with quite a number of kind of exploratory works being
Yeah,
done. So opening hatches and cutting
yeah,
holes in floors. So that took some time to be able to um, actually identify the furthest reach of the damage, which,
yeah.
as I said, was quite far.
Yeah, so everything was like the connector, the toilet connector was kind of hidden behind a wall, and you couldn't see it,
Yeah,
with
yeah, it
looking
was
around.
tiled. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's all tiled. Yeah,
It backs onto it. So naturally nobody's going to see or know that it's there. But again, once you're in there, the floor was, even the tiled floor, it
mhm,
was spongy and bouncy,
right.
and so you could tell that subfloor had been compromised and was damaged.
Mm,
Can't necessarily say it was specifically from that, but upon further investigation, it was confirmed that the pan connector was
yeah, it
not completely loose, but it,
yeah, it was
unfortunately, when
dripping.
you
Yeah,
flush, a large volume of water left the pipework.
and it's amazing how many flats were also affected from this, right?
Yeah,
What
a
were the
large number of
damages? What was the damages in the other flats?
So a number of flats had to be completely stripped out. They had to be completely kind of taken back, bathrooms out. We had to take kitchens out in some areas. Um, Other flats were not as badly damaged, specifically the ones that were kind of on the same floor but kind of further along on either side. The flats below also had damage from where the water had been
Yeah.
tracking down over time. So quite a number of the flats, I can't recall exactly how many now, but
Mm,
several of the flats all had to move out throughout the duration of the work. So they were all put
yeah.
in alternative accommodation, or their tenancy was mutually severed, and they then went on to find other accommodation. So it had a huge impact on the tenants,
Yeah.
the landlords, letting agents. It had quite a
Yeah.
huge knock-on effect.
So many people involved for a little tiny connector.
Yes, yes,
And
definitely.
what's the lesson out of this? What?
I think for me, it was when I saw the extent of damage, which it was approaching. I think it was nearly £1 million that it was approaching, all in for the costs for this claim.
Mm,
Um, that could have been reduced to probably £10,000
yeah.
if regular inspections would have gone on. The As I mentioned, unfortunately, the tenants weren't the most proactive in this situation in notifying their letting agent
Mm,
of mold and kind of damages to the floor and in the bathroom. But even still, if there was regular inspections there
yeah.
every year, that would have picked up on what was quite visible, and it would have been identified long before even half the damage in that particular property was present. So it would have saved a significant amount of
Yeah.
money and upheaval for what was close to a dozen different apartments.
It's really it's amazing how And not just rented out properties, even if residents, property owners live in their
Yes.
apartments, they can be negligent on reporting such things, or even calling out someone, or they try to tackle it themselves.
The other thing, though, there is it's about the trained eye. So
Mm,
people don't know what they know. I don't know.
yeah.
So they don't necessarily add two and two together to think, there's something going on here. By having annual inspections, you've got a trained person that is used to looking at the telltale
Yeah.
signs. So you're anticipating and honing in on potential issues that could morph into this type of event. And it really, really is quite evident that a lot of these claims that blocks are having to tackle
Hmm.
are avoidable.
Yep.
Um, and I think that is the biggest lesson that anyone can take away from this, is that by having risk mitigation protocols in place with annual inspections, it can actually save a fortune.
Absolutely. I don't want to ask how much their insurance went up, but I can imagine a lot. I dealt with very similar issue in a block of flats, and it took few months because we had a new owner in a flat that very similar issue, and they recently moved in. They were doing a lot of works and changing the bathroom, and I don't think they used bad necessarily um, a low quality fittings or that, but it's just one of those things that it did happen. And the flat below um, reported that they can see a little patch on the ceiling. So I said to them, okay, let's monitor for a little longer. Then they went away. They came back from holiday, and they said, "Yeah, it's definitely." Because I asked them to put like a pen around the patch before they went away. They came back and they say, "Yes, it's definitely a larger." And yeah, so we were actually not able to get access to the flat above for quite some time, because they're like, no, I've just done the bathroom. It's not coming from us. It's not coming from us. It's building issue. So quite aggressively towards us, as the managing agent, it's a different issue. It's not my bathroom. So the other way was basically to cut a hole in the ceiling, but it was not what we wanted to do, because we know that would have taken longer, and repairing it and getting someone with a camera in. Anyway, we did it. And then, yes, they established that the similar issue was that. Then we sent a report to that flat. They kept saying again, no, it's not coming from our flat. So that took about 5 weeks, another 5 weeks, and it just continued. They at the last week, I think, before they gave us access to their flat, there was a bucket in a flat below. So again, then another issue comes in, that who's going to pay for it? Okay, well, that comes from your flat, so you will have to pay for the repairs, and you also have to pay for the repairs in the flat below. So you can imagine how many emails and calls and how many thousands of pounds was spent on something that could have been resolved pretty quickly. Because one of the plumbers who attended, he said, it's definitely coming from the toilet. It can't be anything else. It's the only, and we know water travels, but it was that.
The difficulty that you've got, and I think, so when you are a homeowner and you live in a house, right, you are responsible for the upkeep of that house, etc.
Yeah.
When you're in a block of flats, right, your decisions affect your neighbours.
Yeah.
And the difficulty that there is you've got a very disparate stakeholder group. And for the block manager, a life is a nightmare, because you've got the tenant, the leaseholder, the letting agent, the block manager,
Mm.
the freeholder.
Yeah.
none of whom collaborate. You may get the letting agent that talks to the tenant and the leaseholder that talks to the tenant, but you never have that fluid sort of collaboration.
Yeah,
And
you're right.
that's where, as a risk management, having a risk management background, loss assessing, it actually became so apparent that is critical going forward for blocks and for leaseholders. Otherwise, they're not going to have any insurance because the insurers are voting with their feet. They're leaving the sector because their appetite for that risk is zero.
Yeah, I mean, we met at one of those events, and it was really interesting because it's affecting all buildings. But how do you typically approach trace of access and access in the blocks?
Um, so I guess it depends on the situation. So if it's that there's a suspicion that there is an issue and that a targeted trace and access is needed, then it's really a deductive process in that you have to rule out certain things. Sometimes it can be fairly obvious what an issue is, but the kind of the safest way is ruling out what it's not, and then leading to ultimately what the actual cause is. So it's methodically approaching the situation that, for example, you mentioned that they noticed staining from above. That's not going to be coming from that particular flat. It's going to be coming from either the flat above them or potentially further up. So what you would do is start in the flat above, given the consent to enter and actually carry out some checks. You can use a number of different tools and methods with that, whether that be using moisture meters, sometimes just pulling access panels out or bath panels can identify an issue. It may be that there's a number of issues at play, which is quite often the case. So in situations like that, tracer dye can be effective in determining whether that particular fault is causing water below or whether it's causing damage elsewhere. Once you've then identified what it's not and are left with either what it is, whether that be one thing or multiple, you can then address those, and that should hopefully solve the problem unless there are other issues. What we find in blocks is there's never typically just one issue. We go to, I mean, that story I told you before about that large pan connector leak. What happened there, which again made it somewhat complicated, is we were able to identify that the pan connector was the issue, but when we were then tracking the spread of the damage, the readings that we were getting on some areas in some of the apartments on the concrete were starting to kind of peter off and get low, but then they picked up a couple of feet away. And what we then found out within that apartment was there was another leak that was going on within that apartment, and so that was causing some damage itself, but there was also a portion of the property that had damage due to that, and they ended up then blending, and so the laminate flooring was blown in quite a number of places. So it's sometimes difficult to be able to um, kind of identify these issues in its entirety and then just leave it at that without then uncovering, unfortunately, other issues. It can be like opening a can of worms, but these are all things that need to be identified, because if we hadn't have found that, that then would have caused even greater issues and
Yeah.
potentially a similar claim to the one that they just experienced. So it was fortunate in that sense, but definitely taking a methodical approach and ruling out what isn't the cause is a very safe way of being able to get a resolution.
Yeah.
The thing there, though, is because we've got another situation, a similar one that's going on at the moment, and there's 5 flats involved. Okay. And it was as a result of a pipe under the bath. So the
Mm.
adjuster has come in, it's gone into major loss. Major loss means that the claim is in excess of £100,000.
Wow.
So now it's been appointed to a new adjuster. He's coming in and saying, no, there's loads of issues at play here. We want to apply 5 excesses to every single flat, but it is one event.
Yeah.
So we have to take a pragmatic approach and negotiate with the insurer a win-win situation for the block and for all parties. Now, we've actually agreed a compromise to come down to 2 excesses instead of all 5. So this is where our expertise sort of straddles over all these issues, in that we've got the loss assessing, negotiating the claim,
Mm.
but also that is at the end. Really, the annual inspections should hopefully reduce the volume of claims. So all these elements come into play.
How do we prevent these? Like, because you mentioned earlier, Lindsay, something that majority of these events could have been prevented.
Yeah.
And how do we, because Ben, you spoke about different devices, and is there something that anyone can buy? Are there any tools out there that anyone can buy and maybe install in their property, especially if it's rented out?
Yeah, so there's a variety of different systems out there. So you have leak detection devices, which can be either passive or active.
Mhm.
So a leak detection device is something that you can fit to, it's usually right about where your water enters the property, where your stop tap is. You put a device there. Sometimes it can just clip over it. Sometimes it actually is kind of replacing part of the pipe work. That will then be able to track the water flowing through the property,
Mm.
and it can then identify anomalies which may be due to an escape of water, whether that be a pinhole leak or whether
Yeah.
there's been a complete burst. Passive systems just work in the background, just kind of tracking and documenting the water usage and consumption. An active leak detection system takes that one step further, and it can have automatic shut-off valves within it, so that if it
Oh,
detects an anomaly or it suspects that there is a leak, it can automatically shut off the supply of water to that property.
interesting.
They're great. I mean, sometimes they can shut off water
Mm.
for things that may not be an
Yeah.
escape of water. Like if, for example, you decide to run a bath that you've never ran in a year, it might suspect that there's a leak, and it can shut that off. Installing those in an individual home is one thing. Doing that across a block of apartments is a completely different matter. Some devices aren't compatible
Okay.
for large blocks. And then those that may be, the cost to actually install those can be significant,
Right.
because some of these apartment blocks may be repurposed buildings that were previously industrial buildings or offices. And so pipe work and plumbing work is all over the place. And so to then have to go into each flat and install that, the
Mm.
cost is absolutely huge, which I can appreciate would be off-putting to most people. The
Yeah.
results can be fantastic in the sense of stopping an escape of water. However, it will only stop an escape of water from a water feed or like a sink feed. So it won't stop if you have an issue with your waste, for example, in your sink or your
Yeah.
shower.
Yeah.
It won't stop that from happening. It will only stop water that you're drawing into the property, not any that you're actually releasing. So there are kind of downsides, or not downsides to it, but there are elements that it won't protect you from.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, there are things that can be done, but the cost to do those can
Mm.
be
And do
hundreds
you
of
do
pounds
any
per apartment.
repairs yourself at Asprey? Do you
So
do any repairs or?
So we do the reinstatement. So when it comes to an escape of water, we don't carry out the fix,
Hmm.
but what we do is we carry out the reinstatement. So we reinstate the resultant damage from that escape of water or from that peril. So if it was a joint that had broken,
Hmm.
a plumber would come in, carry out that fix. That report or invoice would be sent to the insurers, and then we would come in and reinstate all of the damage that was caused by that joint breaking. So whether that be the bathroom, kitchen,
Yeah.
whatever it may be, we reinstate the all damages. From BRM side, we don't carry out the fix ourselves. The reason for this, it avoids a conflict of interest. We
Right.
don't want to be seen as somebody who is charging for a service where
Yeah.
we're going in and finding issues, but then conveniently we're then able to say, well, we'll fix them as well, because there's the age old kind of concern that, are you just creating issues
Yes.
to then charge to fix? And so that's not what we're about. We're purely about helping people. We're not in it to try and upsell and make more money like that. We just
Yeah.
want to report on the condition in a completely unbiased manner, give people the facts and the information, and then they can then go ahead and do what they need and what we would recommend.
Yeah. So how do you work alongside property managers, for example, if you are to inspect a large building
Mhm.
and you can give me the number of a building that you worked on, and the number of units, and how did you assess all of them? Is that what were you appointed to do so? And how did the leaseholders, because obviously you speak to them as well, because you go and they
Mhm.
give you access. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we actually have got one that we have just been working on recently, which is a large building in London. It comprises of multiple separate blocks,
Mhm.
um, totaling over 450 units. So a lot of apartments.
Yeah.
Some of these apartments are quite large apartments that have duplex flats. So
Hmm.
more than one level for some of these apartments. Outside balcony areas.
Yeah.
They had um, uh, heating, so the heating system within the property also ran within the skirting boards as well. So the radiators were effectively the skirting boards. So there
Mm.
was plumbing hidden within that as well, which can add to, whilst it's a very efficient way of heating a property, it also creates quite a significant risk from an escape of water potential there. So that was quite a large, that was a very large project to
Yeah.
do. And we got involved with the director there to carry out these inspections. They wanted plumbing inspections across all of the flats, along with flat entrance fire door inspections, and we carried that out, and we have been able to successfully inspect almost exactly 80% of the
Hmm.
apartments there. That's been on a number of different attendance visits, with several people involved. We managed all of the communication directly in house
Okay.
at BRM. So we got the contact details for the leaseholders and the
Hmm.
letting agents. We then reached out to each individual person or occupier, arranged a booking
Hmm.
and a time that we would be going there, and then carried that out.
Yeah.
So the block manager had to have almost no input whatsoever, other than us
Mm.
reporting to them what apartments we've been maybe struggling to get access
Yeah.
to, in which case they helped. But they had a completely hands-off approach to it.
Yeah. Do you require plans, for example? Because that is something that I guess it will be helpful, but also know that that is something that is kind of rare to have in a building,
Yes.
and it's a problem, right?
It is, yeah. It's rare. I think I've had plans quite a few times. However, being able to read them sometimes is a different thing. Some of these plans were original plans that
Mm.
had been photocopied so many times you
Yeah.
could barely even see them. But plans definitely help, because it helps understand where the plumbing or the kind of service pipes and waste pipes are located. So it
Yeah.
definitely helps. It also helps understand the kind of layer by layer of each apartment. Sometimes it varies, especially with maybe repurposed buildings where they have to kind of rework an apartment layout based on what that floor looks like. And so whilst modern apartments may have an exact copy of each flat all the
Mhm.
way up, some apartments aren't like that, and it might be kind of half
Yeah.
half an apartment kind of here and then another one kind of offset. So when you're looking and thinking, is
Yeah.
this issue coming from here? It's not. So that can confuse things, and having plans definitely aids in identifying where something may be going wrong or where something needs to be
Yeah.
looked at.
And that extends your involvement, isn't it? Because you just have to go and do these, findings yourselves. What preventative measures can managing agents take to to avoid such leaks, or especially when we're not managing flats?
Mhm.
Like, what? Because we have no control, right? So what
Yeah,
do you think we can do?
yeah. It is difficult because, as you say, they don't necessarily have the control within the specific flats.
Yeah.
However, working with the block and the maybe the kind of the RMC or the directors within that block to educate on the benefits of having regular inspections that would ultimately be the responsibility of the individual leaseholders, but for the greater benefit of the block, because we often find people are frustrated when
Yeah.
they're in a flat and they're being kind of riddled with problems from a flat
Mhm.
above, a flat to the left, to the right, and they're doing everything they can, but they're suffering as a result of inaction from other people. And so that can create an almost hostile environment within
Yeah.
blocks where people are at each other's throats, kind of blaming people for this, that, and the
Yeah.
other. So
Yeah.
I think having that education to say, look, regular inspections are really the only way of being able to identify and you're never going to be able to 100% prevent an issue.
Yes.
Not possible. It's the reason insurance is in
Yeah.
place for
Absolutely.
for an unforeseen event. But what you can do is mitigate that, and having these inspections mitigates that risk significantly to a point where if there is an issue, it can be identified long before the damage is extensive to some degree, almost
Mm.
never requiring a claim, depending on the excess. And that proactive approach not only benefits the the block manager from less kind of admin work,
Yes.
but it also benefits the leaseholders knowing that they've got a better maintained property that's actually being looked at more frequently. The tenants or the occupiers are going to have a better quality of life, knowing that they're not having to suffer these problems, potentially move out,
Yeah.
and have all of this disruption. And the building itself, having a better maintained and a better um, a kind of quality building ultimately increases the value of the building.
Yeah.
So it actually
Absolutely.
then can financially benefit the leaseholders who may wish to sell in the future if they've got a clear log of inspections that they've had over 3 to 5 years showing this is what the condition of the property is. We found these issues, we fixed them. Here's a log of it. So it's almost like a service log from a car. They then are in the best position to sell that property,
Yeah.
giving someone else confidence that um, they actually have done everything they can and there's no hidden issues,
Yeah.
and they're not going to be buying basically just a leaking bucket.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in terms of, um, you've mentioned earlier the communication that
Mhm.
we as property managers have with leaseholders.
Yes.
We often send emails with check your drains, do this,
Mhm.
do that.
Yes.
But is it followed? No, it's not. And it's only followed, or it's only raised when an issue comes. So
Yes.
we can't implement this in any way. And we can't go into people's flats and, clean their drains and do any of that and check
Mhm.
whether there are leaks, and again, it's not whether the property is rented out or it's you as the owner live there. But
Yeah.
it is something that because we know that any of these, and the issue that you mentioned at the very beginning, and these stories that we tell, they have such significant impact, whether it's financial, whether it's someone being moved out from their flat for weeks until the flat is repaired. But it's very difficult um, to have that impact on leaseholders, and to make them understand that we are doing it to help
Yes.
your assets and to protect your assets. But yeah, it's often when we find like kind of we're at a dead end.
This is where we can help as well, because what's actually happening is the block world is at the precipice
Mm,
of some very challenging roads ahead.
yeah,
And that is primarily coming from the insurance and the escalation of excesses. It's also stemming from people abdicating their responsibilities from a leaseholder's point of view. No, it's not coming from my flat, it's
mm,
coming from someone else's. And,
yeah,
and as I say, that is causing property damage to your
yes,
neighbours. So the only way to do this is for the block. The block, just like an insurance cost, there should be a risk mitigation cost,
hmm,
which is the cost of insurance that can be taken out the service charge,
hmm,
and you can identify and carry out the inspections on every single dwelling. But what you can also do is, by doing that, you're identifying the compliant and the
yeah,
non-compliant leaseholders. Now, going forward, you are creating, unfortunately, the hostile environment, because excesses are going up
yeah,
and people, whilst they were prepared to cover the cost of 250 and 500 pounds, when it comes to 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50,000 pounds, people are not so accommodating.
yes,
So, by creating a framework to manage the risk of the block,
hmm,
by identifying leaseholders who are compliant and not compliant,
hmm,
you are being able to manage the exposure, which is going to drive down your claims, it's going to drive down your premiums, and it's going to drive down your
yeah.
excesses. But it's also going to create a more harmonious living environment for people that are living in the block.
Yeah, we're definitely speaking to more people from insurance, and they will talk about this more. Um, but what I wanted also to ask earlier is, because this is not, you don't see leaks only in old buildings; they're also in new builds, right?
Mhm.
And also the other I just remember that we were taking a block, taking on the management, and they had an issue in one flat where the flat is vacant. The owners don't live in the country, and they come once a year, twice a year, and the flat is basically empty. So
Mhm.
what as we were taking over, that was it takes around 3 months, right, to kind of um tender to get everything. But as I went to tender, that was the first thing that they said. So that they had a leak, and they needed access to that flat, so they had to break in. And I said, as you are already, you're doing works and everything, I understand that you can't get hold of the owners, but make sure you find the stopcocks and you just shut off the electricity and the water in that flat. And that will happen. Obviously, not to go in details, that the owners were not very happy that someone broke into their flat. But I must say, 3 years later, they still haven't collected their keys from me because they haven't been to the flat. But it's also like, for us as a managing agent, that is a challenge. And like
Mhm.
I said, having different types of buildings, you can experience the leaks in any of those. But
Yeah.
But that's
how
also
often how often, Lindsay, do you think we should have these checks, as of every year?
The
that you make?
insurers are saying that now they're carving out. So if a flat is not occupied,
Hmm.
you've not got insurance unless certain conditions of insurance are
Okay.
met. Part of that is you're having to go in with weekly inspections. So if you've got a prolonged an occupancy, that really has got to, you've got to go in every
Mm.
single week.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the insurer will repudiate the claim because they'll say, well, hold on a minute. If that flat was inspected weekly, you would not have this claim. So as a block, I think it's very important to make all leaseholders aware that if there's any period of an occupancy, they must schedule weekly visits to ensure the flat
Yeah.
is safe and secure and free from any water issues. Otherwise, they will not be insured.
Yeah. I think that's a hot topic about insurance, and it is something that will continue, for for a little longer, until something is in place, as of every single leaseholder understand that you need to do this, otherwise you are not insured.
Mhm.
Um, what are the common issues that delay or um what was the question I wanted to ask? What are the common issues that the delay or complicate insurance claims?
Um, I think um, depends on the claim, but if we're looking at specifically escape of water, as we mentioned before, sometimes the biggest delays can come from actually just finding out what is causing
Hmm.
the damage. We've had countless claims where um, various different plumbing companies and contractors have come in and said, "This was the issue. I've fixed this." A couple of weeks later, there's still water coming through. So a different contractor comes out. No, this was the issue. I fixed this. And before you know it, 6 to 12 months can have passed, and the actual issue could still not have been found. And it's often it often comes down to knowing who to actually call to actually identify that problem. So this isn't to knock plumbers at all, but quite often people will call a plumber if they've got a leak, thinking that
Oh,
they'll be able to come in and fix it. But
yeah,
whilst a plumber is great in their particular area, identifying a leak and using specific equipment isn't necessarily their area of expertise, whereby a specialist leak detection or trace and access company has those skills and the equipment at their disposal to be able to accurately identify what that is. The everyday plumber wouldn't have maybe acoustic devices
yeah,
or moisture meters, tracer dyes. They wouldn't necessarily have that.
no,
So often I find that and I've gone in, and I'm not a plumber by background, but I've been in after plumbers have come in to a bathroom and said there's absolutely no issues here, none whatsoever, and yet there is visible damage, and it's clear that there is an active issue. And just by using a moisture meter, you can then map that particular property, that room, and I've been able to then help even with plumbers on site say behind this plasterboard is where I'm confident that this issue is. They've gone cut a hole through that plasterboard, and they've identified that there's a leak on the water feed hidden in the void there. And as I said, it's not to say that plumbers, it's not to knock plumbers, but they have a particular area of expertise which is very different to that of leak detection or
yeah,
trace and access. And so that does cause probably the greatest delay. Probably close to that is then just communication. As you've mentioned, sometimes just getting in contact with that be the tenant or the actual owner or occupier, that can take quite some time. We've had a similar situation, as you mentioned, a vacant property. It
mm,
was someone's second home. They lived abroad, and we were actually needing access to have a look at the property in relation to another claim that we believed had caused damage. But when we went in there, the ceiling of this property had actually collapsed
wow,
due to an identified issue from the flat above, and they also had their own issue internally, and their kitchen was ruined. We were assured that that property was frequently looked at, and there was a cleaner, but it was evident that that wasn't the case, and we struggled to get in contact with the owners and get that information. We were still told that there was regular inspections, but when the ceilings collapsed in a kitchen and you've got blown flooring everywhere, it's obvious it's not been inspected for probably at least
Yeah.
3 to 6 months. So that kind of communication is a really critical thing that, again, can cause delays, but not just delays, but confusion. You can have conflicting information being passed by one person and another,
Yeah,
and
that
that
has
then can
happened.
actually
Yeah.
compromise the claim itself, in
Mm.
that one person can say something, and it can completely um, kind of contradict what somebody else is saying,
Yeah.
to the detriment of what could have been a valid claim. And we've had situations like that as well. So yeah, definitely finding the
Mm.
actual source of the problem and communicating effectively are
Yeah.
two areas that cause quite significant delays.
And having leaseholders who are actually cooperating with this, because, and accommodating your visits, because, your reports are important. And just
Mhm,
going back to the reports that you write and then you send to, let's say you're working with the property managers and you've
mhm,
done the big building, the big estate that you've mentioned earlier.
mhm,
So that's a lot of reports, a lot of findings. And let's say 200 of these flats needed some work
mhm.
where because you don't do the work, so you pass that to the building manager, who then passes on to the leaseholder, who is to carry out these works themselves. And again, it just comes back to what Lindsey was saying earlier. It's like, yeah, great, they do have the reports, but will they do anything?
Yeah, so a good point. And so some blocks want us to manage everything, in that when we've carried out the inspections, we will send the reports direct to the leaseholders.
Mm.
Sometimes the
Okay.
block managers will want us to just send all of the reports to them, and they will then filter them to the relevant leaseholders. What we do as part of our process is each individual flat report has its own recommendations.
Mhm.
We will then send that to the leaseholder, and we follow up after that for a period of time to request from them an invoice or a receipt that shows that they've had those recommendations carried out. We then track that, and we can send that over to the block manager or the broker, whoever we're dealing with, so that they then have a report of who's actually actioned these recommendations and been proactive, and who hasn't. So then there's actual log of who's been compliant and who
Yeah.
hasn't, so that in the future, if there is an event, they can say, well, actually, this person did carry out this work. Here's the
Mm.
receipt. We can see it's been done. Or this person
Yeah.
hasn't. They've ignored all communication. So we actually follow that up. So we don't necessarily just leave it to chance. We go that one step further to help both the block managers, brokers, and the leaseholders by giving them these recommendations
Yeah.
and following up with it to ensure that they're done. We can't force them to,
No.
but by making that communication and reaching out to them, we're pushing them as much as we can
Yeah.
from our position.
Yeah, but what it also does for the block, it provides clarity, because what happens from a block point of view, you don't know who's been in, who's done what, etc. What we're actually doing by virtue of this is also keeping a record. So if you've had someone gone in and their work has not been up to standard
Yeah.
and caused a problem, you can identify that immediately. So what we're actually doing is we're providing additional layer of clarity for the block as well, to actually understand what's actually gone on within those flats within that period of time.
It is. I wish leaseholders are a little bit more understanding on this side, because we very often, like we mentioned at the beginning, is we would not even be given access to the property, and not to say that, okay, we are going to make a hole on the ceiling because it's just traveling few flats down and we need to start from somewhere. So it is invasive. Sometimes it is, it's definitely kind of breaking their environment, and comfort, and I totally understand. But there is that at the end of the day, it comes to this collective owning a flat in a building where we need to maintain in the best possible way. But yeah, it's difficult.
It's very difficult, but what you've got is you've got a flat and the fixtures and fittings are the demise of the leaseholder. But when you actually strip all that back and you go to the bricks and to the actual basics, that is actually communal space. So
Mhm.
the difficulty is that a format has got to be devised whereby the collaboration does happen. Otherwise, people are just not going to have any insurance. And that's where the landscape is heading at the moment,
Mhm.
because the insurers are actually saying enough, and you can't blame them.
I think what happened in few occasions in the past few years in my career is where, and what Ben said earlier, that conflict of interest, because they're basically saying, oh, you're sending your contractors because you're trying to make more money, because, agents work differently, whether they take commission on the works, or, whether it's a Section 20, or they're charging for insurance. There are reasons why these charges are there, because it's separate from the day to day, and that's why there is a charge. But when that communication is and you're not allowed to do your job properly, and when the trust is not there, that I'm actually trying to resolve an issue, it's not about making money here, because we are transparent with the charges. It's not like we're going to charge you without you knowing. And I've often have said in few occasions is, if you have someone, if you know a contractor, we just need to find a couple of contractors to have comparison view on the issue. But by all means, I welcome your contractor, because it's not all about the money. We are trying to actually make sure that this building is in good condition. It's your home.
Yeah,
It's your home.
Yeah.
you're in a very difficult situation. I don't envy the block manager at all, and the whole structure of the BRM has actually been designed to work with
Hmm.
blocks and the brokers. Uh, and the byproduct is hopefully everyone has a better living experience.
Yeah.
That's basically what this is all about.
Which leads me to a question. What what's the most rewarding part of your work?
Um, so I think for me, it's being able to go to a block that have had a problem or had an issue that they need support with,
Yeah.
and being able to actually give them visibility and clarity that they've never had before,
Mm.
and really understand what their risks are, because almost 80% of a block manager's kind of property, if they take a block, they've got almost no visibility there. They
Mm.
actually only see the communal area, so that you kind of you're working on a huge unknown kind of or an unseen risk there, that we're able to help fill that gap and sit down and say, look, this is the reality of your situation. Because we've had countless people say, oh, we've not had a claim in years, there's nothing wrong with our block.
Mm.
And you go to those, and those are the ones that end up being kind of the most at risk. And it's that I don't know if it's a complacency that they think because they've not had an issue, or
Yeah.
because their block's new. We've had claims where the day a high-end apartment block has opened in Manchester, we've been called in because there's been a leak. And
Mm.
that's because something wasn't installed correctly. So that person who came from overseas to move into that property had to move right back out day one, and that was because of an issue, and that was a high end block. And so there is an element of complacency there, in some degree, when you've got situations like that. But being able to provide people with that visibility and clarity, and you can kind of see that light bulb kind of moment where they think, actually, do you know what, this data is invaluable. It's almost it's very rewarding, because you can see that they think, why haven't we done this earlier? because
Yeah.
for them it's completely transformational.
You're switching the lights on. It's as simple as
Yeah.
that. But when you're grappling around in the dark,
Yeah.
and what we're doing is we're coming in, we're switching the lights on, we're giving the visibility in order for you, the block, to be able to then do what you need to be doing. And that's all we're doing.
Yeah.
And it is very rewarding.
Yes. If you could improve one thing about the industry and how leaks are handled, what would that be?
Oh, I would say it's the collaboration. I think we are in this place because of the disparate nature of the stakeholder group. It is extremely fragmented and it's everyone, it's your problem.
Yeah.
Right? So I think the biggest takeaway from this is we all as a sector have to work together in order to come up with the practical solutions to make our space better.
What is your final advice for property managers? Because we are not in any way the knowledge that you have, we don't have. We work with you. But what would you advise property managers who are dealing with not just one leak, but multiple leaks from the same flat, maybe, or the same building, and they are working in this difficult environment?
Put us in. BRM Solutions, it was interesting, but a few years ago, Michael Gove, the then Secretary of State, commissioned a report on what was going wrong within the sector.
Yeah.
And the most interesting finding out of that was the lack of relevant data. So it is absolutely critical that you unveil what's going on there, and that will provide the way forward.
Amazing. This is a very long topic, and there is the conversation can go for a long time because there is so much to be said. But I just hope that anyone who listens will take something out of this conversation.
Yeah, a brief call, give us a ring. We hopefully can help and provide the clarity.
Thank you both.
No problem. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.